So today I finished the show Shogun. Um, it's a kind of a Japanese American made show. It's both countries kind of involved with it. A Japanese American production. Um, because it's about a foreigner who enters 1600s Japan, specifically in the year 1600, and the show is about this guy. He's this funny fella named John Blackthorne who travels around the world. He's apparently a pirate or something. He ends up in Japan, and his crew is like decimated. And then, he's kind of the risk taker out of his crew. So when his crew gets captured, his crew's kind of being like, but he was like, oh, I'm gonna actually try to interact with these Japanese and try to make a deal with them. He was kind of more ambitious of the group of his crew, so he ends up kind of, and that leads to him ending up in the middle of this whole political chaos scene with this guy named Toranaga, and Toranaga, he's a real kind of a real character, I'd say. Um, and Toranaga, he has these problems with this council. This council is protecting this. It's a regent council running stuff for this little beta kid who is like 5 years old. He's actually like 10, but he's not competent enough to run the kingdom of Japan yet. So this council's running everything for him. But Toranaga doesn't like Ishido. They kind of get at each other. Then Toranaga quits, and then the whole rest of the show is Ishido and his council, which is incomplete, against Toranaga, because they need 5 people to vote on stuff in the council. That's why it's incomplete. So, and it's Ishido and his incomplete council going against Toranaga, and then the main focus on the side of that of the show is the interactions of John Blackthorne with the people in Japan, the traditions, the rituals, kind of a lot of social commentary on like the negatives of these very strict rituals that Japan sort of held at that time and might still have today, but there's been a lot of modernization since then. But it it's a very critical lens of that culture, and he also hangs out with this woman named Mariko-sama. She specifically wants to be called Sama, because she's just that way, I guess. But Mariko-sama, she's this Christian convert, Catholic specifically, who kind of was from this evil samurai line or something, with this guy named Akechi who is just bad or something, and they all hate Akechi. And she was only spared because she married some dude who's just an alcoholic and depressed. His name's Buntaro, and basically, so beginning of the show, they're kind of stuck in Osaka dealing with the council. They have to escape, and Blackthorne has to escape with Toranaga. They do, and then Buntaro, he goes out swinging, gets left behind, and you think he's dead, and then it's John Blackthorne hanging out with these two Japanese ladies in his house, one of them being Mariko-sama and the other being Fuji, and they're just living Japanese stuff, and he's like kind of weirded out by the culture. He eats some natto, and he thinks it tastes like cheese, and the girls I don't know what the joke with the natto was. The girls made fun of him for eating natto. And then Mariko, since her husband is dead apparently, she gets it on with my boy John Blackthorne. Good job, John Blackthorne. And then the next episode they realize, oh, Buntaro's alive, and then there's some drama with that. And then Toranaga's like, hey girl, you gotta send Blackthorne to the brothel, so you, in kind of an indirect way, kind of be like, this is how you're making Buntaro feel, so you gotta send Blackthorne to the brothel. And so that was kind of a awkward scene. It's kind of a weird. Felt that the scene in the brothel was very interesting because it felt very mystical. Like he was in this weird kind of world, this kind of erotic world. And then one of the scenes that really struck out to me was when he was leaving the brothel the next morning, and it's kind of like weird. It's really eerie because the girls from the brothel are dressed in these kind of very exotic ways, and it's like they kind of seem almost like aliens. I don't know how to explain it. Like they seem kind of like deities. That's how they seem, and it's really, and the music playing it, and it seems like they're from an out of place world compared to the village, those brothel ladies, and that was a very like kind of eerie and kind of mystical scene. Um, but yeah, and then there's all that with Buntaro, and then I thought the ending was most interesting because so basically stuff starts going wrong, and it looks like Toranaga's not going to win. So his big plan is to basically kind of figure out how to win the fight without actually fighting, and he doesn't say this explicitly. And so he fakes wanting to surrender. He's like, oh, I'll just surrender, whatever. And all his crew's like, no, we're so loyal to you, why are you giving up? And then his like father, his mentor, like his kind of one of his father figures, he's like, I'm gonna commit seppuku if you're actually like surrendering. And then Toranaga doesn't say anything, and the man just gets to commit seppuku, which kind of sucks. And then you realize, wow, Toranaga is really determined with the surrender. And then he sends Mariko and John Blackthorne there, and then Mariko almost gets seppuku'd, but Shido comes in. He's like, get out of here, because they're kind of trapped in the Osaka castle, and she's protesting that by doing the seppuku. And you think it's going well, and then a bunch of ninjas show up, the shinobi. They show up and attack, and then they're being led by Yabushige, who's a little dumb weasel who plays both sides, and Yabushige, he's just letting them in, and then, but Mariko-sama's goal is to die, and she was unable to commit the seppuku appropriately because the Shido came in, and you don't know that at that part of the show. You just think she just has some plan to get some people out of the castle or whatever, and then they're blocked in this little shed, and the ninjas are gonna blow up the door for whatever reason. It's like a wood door. I don't get why they don't like kick it in, but they decide to put some TNT on the door or something. And Mariko's like, I protest the shinobi, and stands right by the door, and boom, blows up. And then next episode, you realize that Toranaga is kind of an asshole. That's the most interesting episode to me that I want to talk about, because basically the first scene I want to talk about is like, so John Blackthorne, he feels like shit because Mariko died. He doesn't really want to live, and his boat, which landed by a village, gets sunk, and villagers get attacked and killed because Toranaga blames them for working with the Yabushige and blowing up the boat or whatever. And then, so basically, John Blackthorne, he goes up to Toranaga. He's like, Mariko made an arrangement with me for my life for the boat to get blown up, so it's not actually the villagers' fault. It's actually like the Osaka people's fault. And then Toranaga is like, yeah, whatever. And then what was interesting was John Blackthorne, who was like very critical of the Japanese rituals and stuff. He was very critical of it, which was especially amplified in the scene. There's a scene where in episode 5 he puts a dead pheasant in front of his house, and he's like, "Hey guys, if you touch this, you die, yeah." Just as like a joke, like sarcastic joke, but the Japanese people didn't understand that. So like some little gardener, he's like, "This thing's stinky as hell. This thing's been staying out here for a week." He takes it off, and then people are like, Blackthorne, Anjin-sama, he said, you die if you touch that. And then Gardner gets killed. And then Anjin's like, what? What? So he's like very stunned by that, and then he wants to leave Japan. But going back to it, he's like very critical of the very ritualistic culture. But at the ending there, he's like speaking Japanese, and then he himself wants to commit seppuku for Mariko and for being an enemy for Toranaga, and feeling that he should be blamed for Mariko's death. And then Toranaga weirdly punches him. And Toranaga has been very like, when somebody is like, I'm gonna commit seppuku, like Toranaga's always like, yeah, go do it, buddy, go do it, come on, go stab yourself in the belly. But it was really weird because Toranaga like punched him, like, don't do that, I don't want you doing that. And it's kind of confusing, like, okay, that's kind of out of character for Toranaga. And it was kind of weird because it was like Anjin was being like trying to follow these Japanese rituals, like about the seppuku himself for honor and stuff, even though that was never in his belief system originally. And then Toranaga, who's all about that, forces him to stop and just punches him. It's like, go take that somewhere else, like, you're being stupid. But she's always been like very like strict on the rituals, but now he's like, yeah, you're just being stupid with this. And then later, Yabashige, he's about to get killed for betraying, about to get seppuku'd for betraying Toranaga, and they're talking, and then you realize Toranaga's kind of a cunt, because Toranaga, he's basically the same as Ishido. He just wants power, and he acts like this humble leader, which is a very interesting theme. I think that could be a very interesting theme in a story, is humble leaders who truly have like a dark heart for wanting power and stuff. And Toranaga, he's kind of like that, and he's like, yeah, I've really never cared. I just let people die. He's like, I basically throw bodies at the problem. I don't care, actually. I just basically want to be Shogun. I want to take control of the nation and just have my own piece over the nation. Which he's based off of Tokugawa Ieyasu. It's basically the same characters from actual 1600s Japan, but the names are changed and events are changed around. But so he does eventually achieve that off screen because he's based off of Tokugawa Ieyasu, but that's all off screen. But he explains all that, like, he's basically like, I don't care. I don't really care about the people under me. I throw them at the problem. And you understand why he punches Anjin at that one scene, because he doesn't actually care about the Japanese rituals, but rather he's actually utilizing them to gain power, because he's kind of living outside of those rituals, but he knows that all the people around him abide by those rituals. So he uses that. He goes with the wind. That's what he says. He uses that to manipulate people and gain power, and and he just throws bodies. Like, Mariko is a very smart woman, but he didn't care. He knew that he would split up his enemies if Mariko-sama died, because she had a good reputation. So he knew that if she died, that he had a better chance against his enemies, with mainly Ishido, and could bring the council to his side if Mariko-sama died. And he doesn't see the humanity in Mariko, because she's like a super smart woman who's like a lot more intelligent than everybody there. And then he doesn't care about his father figure, who's like been this wise mentor his whole life, and he just wants power. And like, it's really crazy. You feel deceived because he's been this humble leader throughout the show. I think the main goal you think he has is that he just wants to protect he mainly just wants to protect the heir to the kingdom. He wants to be the regent so he can protect the last ruler's son, who's currently just a little kid. But you realize that he just wants to be Shogun. He's just utilizing that whole situation for power. You realize that he has no humility. He has no care for the people he's been talking to and had relationships with throughout the whole show, and that he's just kind of an asshole. And I think that was a great twist. I think it really, how they just, it was really good how like the show, they went from making Toranaga from this like okay dude who was like pretty good, he was a pretty good leader, into actually like a slimy, snaky asshole who just doesn't give a fuck about people, doesn't give a fuck about the rituals, and just uses them to like manipulate his own way to power, and that he doesn't actually give a fuck about anybody but himself. When he felt like throughout the entire show that he gave a fuck about everybody, but he really only gave a fuck about himself. He was acting humble, but he had kind of all those fences in his heart, and that he was acting nice and humble, but he was actually evil and dark on the inside. I don't know when it shows John Blackthorne in England at the end in that last episode, and Toranaga was talking about how he's just Toranaga. Thing is, that's another aspect of Toranaga's character that I wanted to bring up. Was Toranaga was always like super nice to Anjin. He was like, "I'm gonna help you out. You're gonna help me out." They seem to have a very serious diplomatic relationship. But at the end, he's just to Yabashige when they're talking. He's like, "Oh yeah, I just wanted him near me because I thought he was funny. I just thought he was a joke that I could laugh at and could distract the enemy with or whatever." He did not care. He didn't even care about the main character. And it's like, you watch the main character and Toranaga interact. You watch Blackthorne and Toranaga interact, and it seems like, oh yeah, this is kind of a real working diplomatic political relationship that's going on. But really, he didn't care. He just thought Anjin was funny, so he kept him around. Like, he just didn't give a fuck about anybody, and it kind of sucks. But yeah, John Blackthorne, he's in England at the end of his life, but Toranaga's talking about just keeping him there, keeping him in Japan, I guess just as a joke, which is kind of cruel. And then like it shows like Blackthorne really traumatized when he's really old, so it seems like he was stuck in Japan for like probably 40 years or something, just trying to get out, and Toranaga just kept sabotaging him in secret. And I think I forgot to mention, but that attack on the boat, that was actually Toranaga. Toranaga said it wasn't even the arrangement with Mariko. Just Toranaga just destroyed the boat and killed his own people in the village. And like John Blackthorne trying to do seppuku because he thought Mariko was the one who caused the boat to be sunk, which caused the villagers to be killed by Toranaga. It was actually just Toranaga. He just sunk the boat, and he just wanted to make it seem like he didn't, so he just killed random villagers. Like, he didn't give a fuck. And I think the main theme of that show, of Shogun, is you can't trust anybody who has power. They might seem, anybody who even seems good, like, you just have to be skeptical, because anybody can have a dark heart of secrets and desires for power, and that you should always remain skeptical of intentions, and you shouldn't have a blind loyalty to singular people. And I think that's the main theme of that show. I think the Japanese culture stuff was cool, the whole foreigner in Japan thing was cool, but I think that was really the strongest theme in the show, is that no matter how good a leader seems, you can't trust a leader. So yeah, that's about it. It was a good show. I would rate it like probably 7 to 8 out of 10. 7 like high 7, like 7.8. I would say 7.8 out of 10. It kind of went a little bit slow. I'm not really a big fan of slow stuff. I can watch it, but it's just, sometimes I feel like there needs to be just more stuff going on. I felt like there was a lot of reuse of sets and a lot of talking. Like, it felt like I was just seeing the same places, just with different interactions and stuff. So I felt like there could have been maybe more expansiveness to the world of Shogun, more like action in it, but it felt a lot like The Godfather, and personally I thought The Godfather was a little boring, but yeah, it was a solid 7.8 out of 10 show. It has interesting themes, interesting characters, but I feel like it could be more expansive with its world and setting. And yeah, that's basically it. But yeah, I'd recommend it if you want something slow to watch. But yeah, that's about it.